All right, welcome back to the deep dive.
Hey, glad to be back.
So today we're going to do a deep dive into collaborative learning.
Collaborative learning, yeah.
And, I think we all kind of know that learning with others, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, sometimes you get better results, sometimes you don't.
Yes, definitely right. Like I think we've all had the experience of like working on a group project and some people are really into it and other people aren't and yeah,
Exactly.
it's a mixed bag.
Yeah, so what we want to do in this deep dive is really kind of look at the research behind what makes collaboration effective, what makes it not so effective,
Yeah.
and kind of see how that can inform our practices moving forward.
Yeah. And hopefully avoid some of those pitfalls where we think we're setting up students to work together effectively, but it actually ends up just being, you know, one person doing all the work or people not really learning from each other even though they're, talking to each other.
Right, exactly. And one of the things that we're going to talk about is this idea of social loafing.
Oh, yeah, social loafing.
Which is, I think we've all experienced that, right? That's kind of when you're in a group and you feel like you don't have to pull your weight because other people are doing it, or, you just kind of fade into the background.
Yeah, or maybe you're not intentionally trying to loaf, but you just kind of feel like your contribution isn't really needed or valued or,
Yeah.
other people are already taking care of it. So
Right.
just kind of step back.
Yeah, and I think another thing that we often see is even when there is interaction between students, it's not always the kind of interaction that actually leads to deep learning, right?
Absolutely.
So like for example, if one student just gives the answer to another student without really explaining how they got there,
Hmm.
that's not really helping that other student learn,
Right.
right? They're just getting the answer.
Right. They're not really engaging with the material or, grappling with the concepts.
Exactly. And there's this really interesting research from Webb back in 1989 that actually found that explaining solutions to a partner improves that partner's learning.
Oh, wow.
So it's not just about, getting the answer. It's about actually explaining the process of how you got there.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. So that's kind of the backdrop to our deep dive today is how do we create these conditions where students are really interacting in ways that promote that kind of deep learning and explanation.
Right. So not just collaboration for the sake of collaboration, but collaboration that actually leads to, meaningful learning outcomes.
Exactly. And one of the ways that researchers have tried to do this is through what they call collaboration scripts.
Collaboration scripts.
And essentially what these are sort of structured ways of guiding student interaction.
Uh-huh.
And there are different types of collaboration scripts that have been studied. And one of the, kind of the traditional approaches has been to use these fixed collaboration scripts, which are, very predetermined. Like they lay out specific phases of interaction.
Yeah.
And sometimes even assign roles to students. And Fisher and his colleagues kind of talked about this approach back in 2007.
Yeah, so like a very concrete example of this would be something like a jigsaw activity,
Right.
right? Where, the materials are divided up among students and they each become an expert on their little piece and then they come together and they have to teach each other.
Exactly.
And that forces them to both understand their own material deeply enough to explain it to someone else, but also to, actively listen and learn from their peers.
Exactly. And there's some, there's been some research going back, several decades on this approach. Aronson and his colleagues back in 78 and then Dillenberg and German in 2007
Yeah.
and it's a pretty powerful way to kind of ensure that everybody's participating.
Yeah, it really increases that accountability and that need for elaboration, right? You can't just sit back and let someone else do the work. You have to know your stuff.
Yeah. Right. And then another type of fixed collaboration script is what's called a role assignment script.
Right.
And so in this case, students are actually assigned specific roles within the group. And a really classic example of this is reciprocal teaching, which was, famously studied by Planckser and Brown back in 1984.
Oh, yeah.
And in reciprocal teaching, students take turns being the tutor and the tutee.
Right.
And they engage in these specific activities like summarizing the material, questioning each other, clarifying things, predicting what's going to happen next. And so it's really about, forcing them to kind of articulate their understanding through these roles.
Yeah, it's like active recall, but in a collaborative setting
Exactly.
and focused on reading comprehension.
Mm.
So really helping students to not just passively read the text, but to actively engage with it and make connections and think critically about it.
And they found that that this approach can really improve students' reading comprehension skills and also their cognitive and metacognitive skills. So then another approach is, even more fine-grained dialogue scripts.
Okay.
And so these scripts might actually give students specific questions to ask each other or specific sentence starters to use.
Interesting.
And so, for example, King in 1991 did some work on this where he gave students, questions like, what would happen if? Or why do you think that?
Oh, I see.
And then other researchers like Hollar and Weinberger and their teams, around 2005, they looked at these what they called epistemic scripts, which are basically sentence starters that guide students towards specific types of knowledge building activities.
So instead of just saying, what do you think?
Yeah.
You might give them a sentence starter like, it was found that, or the evidence suggests that.
Right, exactly.
Which kind of prompts them to back up their claims with actual evidence.
Exactly. And they found that, using these types of scripts can actually improve students' ability to draw conclusions, to provide evidence,
Right.
to engage in those higher level thinking skills.
It's really interesting to see how, something as simple as a sentence starter can actually shape the way students are thinking and interacting.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating is how technology has kind of come into play with all of this.
Yeah.
So in recent years, there's been a lot of interest in using these collaboration scripts in computer-supported learning environments.
Okay.
And Kollar and his colleagues did some really interesting work on this back in 2006.
Mm-hmm.
And basically what they found is that when you put these structures online, it can actually reduce some of the coordination costs of group work, right? So it's easier for students to, to keep track of who's doing what and to share information and
I see.
to communicate effectively.
So it's not just about the content of the script itself, but also about how the technology can facilitate the implementation of the script.
Exactly. And they also found that you can actually use technology to make those beneficial activities more salient or even compulsory. Right. So, like, for example, Kohler in 2005 did a study where he used structured text boxes with sentence starters to essentially guide students into constructing arguments step by step.
Mm-hmm.
And so the technology was actually forcing them to engage in those thought processes that we want them to engage in.
Yeah, so it's almost like the technology is acting as a scaffold
Exactly.
to support those collaborative learning processes.
Right. So these fixed collaboration scripts, they can be really helpful in terms of structuring student interaction and making sure that everybody's participating and that they're engaging in the right kinds of activities.
Yeah.
But they also have some limitations.
Okay, what are some of those limitations?
Yeah. So one of the limitations is that they can be kind of overly coercive.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So they're very much imposing this external control on students. And,
Right.
and Dillenberg back in 2002, he actually coined this term over-scripting
Overscript.
to kind of describe this phenomenon where, you're giving students so much structure that it actually kind of zaps their motivation.
Yeah, it can feel very like robotic or, like you're just going through the motions without really thinking for yourself.
Exactly. And especially in these online environments where you can really kind of control what students are doing,
Uh-huh.
it's easy to kind of fall into that trap of over-scripting.
I see. So it's about finding that balance between providing enough structure to be helpful, but not so much that it becomes stifling.
Exactly. And another limitation of these fixed scripts is that they're not really tailored to individual student needs.
Right.
So Kohler and his colleagues found in 2005 that students who are already skilled collaborators, they might actually find these fixed scripts to be kind of unnecessary and even stifling.
Uh-huh.
Whereas students who really struggle with collaboration, they might not get enough support from a generic script.
Right. It's like a one-size-fits-all approach that doesn't really account for the diversity of learners and their different needs.
Exactly. And so this kind of brings us to this idea of adaptive collaboration support.
Adaptive collaboration support.
Which is kind of the next frontier in this area of research.
So what is that exactly?
Yeah, so adaptive collaboration support is basically about trying to tailor the assistance that students receive to their individual needs.
Right.
And people like Dillenberg and Chunikin and Rummel and Weinberger, they've kind of pointed towards this direction back in 2007, 2008.
Uh-huh.
And the basic idea is that, instead of giving everybody the same fixed script, you try to provide support that's, specific to the challenges that each group or each student is facing.
So how do you actually do that? Like, how do you know what kind of support each student needs?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
And that's where the real challenge comes in. Because in order to provide adaptive support, you need to be able to assess the quality of collaborative interaction in real time.
Right.
And, ideally, you want to be able to do that automatically.
Right, because you can't have a teacher, constantly monitoring every single group and every single interaction.
Exactly. Exactly. And so one of the approaches that people have taken is to try to analyze student dialogue,
Oh, okay.
right? So to actually look at what students are saying to each other and try to infer from that,
Huh.
are they engaging in the right kinds of behaviors? Are they helping each other? Are they on the right track?
Yeah, so like natural language processing.
Exactly.
Trying to understand the meaning behind what students are saying.
But the problem is that natural language processing is really hard.
Yeah, it's a very complex task.
And it's still not at the point where it can reliably capture all the nuances of effective collaboration.
Right. Because, there's so many different ways that students can collaborate effectively, and it's not always obvious from just the words they're using.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And so for our deep dive today, we're actually going to focus on a different approach,
Okay, what's that?
which is leveraging existing intelligent tutoring technology
Oh,
to
interesting.
provide adaptive support.
So instead of trying to interpret what students are saying,
Right.
you're looking at what they're actually doing in the system.
Exactly. Exactly. And the reason why this is so promising is that intelligent tutoring systems, they already have these very detailed models of how students solve problems,
Wow.
right? So they can track, every step that a student takes, every error that they make.
Right.
And they can use that information to provide very targeted feedback and guidance.
So you're basically using that existing knowledge about problem solving to inform the adaptive support.
Exactly, exactly. And so we're going to look at two examples of this
Okay.
from the research literature. And we'll also talk about some initial classroom experiences and kind of what the future might hold for this area.
Great. I'm excited to learn more.
All right. So the first example that we're going to look at is based on the cognitive tutor algebra,
Cognitive tutor algebra.
or CTA.
Uh-huh.
And I know you're familiar with CTA.
Yeah, I am.
But for our listeners who might not be, CTA is essentially a system that provides individualized math learning support.
Yeah.
Right. So students work through these problems, and the system kind of tracks their progress and gives them hints and feedback, and
Yeah.
tailors the learning experience to their needs.
Okay.
But what researchers have done is they've actually explored how to extend CTA to support students who are working together.
Oh, interesting.
So not just individual learning, but collaborative learning with CTA.
So how does that work?
Yeah, so the key here is that CTA has this built-in understanding of how students should ideally approach and solve algebra problems. Right. So it has this model of problem solving.
Okay.
And it can detect when a student makes an error or when they start to rely excessively on hints.
Mm.
And there's some really interesting research on these ineffective problem solving strategies.
Okay.
So Baker and his team back in 2004, they found that simply guessing or trying things randomly, what we call trial and error,
Right.
actually has a negative impact on learning.
Really? So just like blindly trying things out can actually hinder learning?
Yeah, it's kind of counterintuitive, right?
It is, yeah.
But basically what they found is that when students are just randomly trying things, they're not really thinking about the underlying concepts. They're not really developing that deep understanding.
They're not making those connections.
Exactly. And then similarly, 11 and her colleagues in the same year, they highlighted this problem of hint abuse,
Interviews.
where students are just, clicking through hints to get the answer without really grappling with the material.
Oh, yeah. I've definitely seen that.
Yeah, and so what the researchers did in this study is they actually used CTA's ability to identify these less effective strategies,
Okay.
like trial and error and hint abuse,
Uh-huh.
as triggers for adaptive collaboration prompts.
Oh, I see.
So if the system detected that a pair of students was engaging in a lot of trial and error,
Yeah.
it would pop up a message encouraging them to discuss their approaches.
Okay.
And figure 1 in the paper actually shows a really nice example of this, where it says, collaborate to find the right answer with the help of the advice you've gotten so far.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so it's not just, giving them the answer or telling them what to do.
Right.
It's actually prompting them to talk to each other.
Reflect on their process.
Exactly, exactly. And
Yeah.
and the findings of this study, which were reported by Diziel and his colleagues in 2007,
Yeah.
they were pretty interesting.
What did they find?
So while they didn't find any significant differences in overall learning outcomes between the groups who received this adaptive prompting and those who didn't,
Okay.
they did see some notable shifts in how the students interacted.
Okay.
So the adaptive prompts led to a decrease in trial and error and hint abuse,
Hmm.
and an increase in students actually explaining their reasoning to each other.
So they were engaging more in those beneficial explanatory behaviors.
Exactly, exactly. And what's really interesting is that this improved interaction behavior actually transferred to a subsequent task on inequalities,
Oh, wow.
where the students who had the adaptive support, they made fewer mistakes.
Hmm.
But as you mentioned, the fact that they didn't find any significant differences in overall learning outcomes
Right.
kind of suggests that we still have more to learn about how to best deliver this kind of support.
Yeah, it indicates that just prompting students to collaborate isn't enough.
Right.
The quality of that collaboration probably matters a lot too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like, how deeply are they explaining things to each other? How well are they understanding each other's explanations?
Right. And
Like-
maybe there are other factors that we need to take into account as well, like,
Yeah.
the nature of the task, the prior knowledge of the student.
The learning goals.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So there's still a lot more research to be done in this area,
For sure.
but it's definitely a promising direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so the second example that we're going to look at is also using CTA,
Okay.
but in a different collaborative learning setup.
Right.
And this is reciprocal peer tutoring.
Reciprocal peer tutoring.
And so in this case, students are taking on these defined roles of tutor and tutee,
Mm-hmm.
and they're working together on these literal equation-solving problems.
Okay.
And they're alternating these roles, and they're communicating through this instant messaging interface.
Mm-hmm.
And figure 2 in the paper actually shows a really nice illustration of this. And what's really innovative about this approach is that the system is not just integrating a problem-solving model from CTA,
Right.
but it's also integrating a model of effective tutoring practices.
Oh, interesting.
So it's actually trying to support the tutors in their role as tutors.
I see. So it's not just about helping the tutee solve the problem, but also about helping the tutor be a more effective tutor.
Exactly.
So how does it actually do that?
Yeah, so basically the system is monitoring both the tutee's problem-solving steps
Uh-huh.
and the tutor's actions.
Okay.
And specifically when the tutor is indicating whether a tutee step is correct or incorrect.
Right.
So if the system detects a discrepancy,
Mm.
for example, if the tutor marks a wrong step as right or vice versa,
Uh-huh.
it intervenes with feedback.
Oh, okay.
And this feedback includes both a social prompt that's directed at the tutor,
Okay.
such as, this step is wrong, tell your partner what mistake they made, here's a hint to help you. And it also includes the kind of cognitive tutoring support that an individual student would typically receive from CTA.
So it's not just correcting the tutor.
Right.
It's also giving them guidance on how to explain the error to their partner,
Exactly.
and even providing them with a hint to facilitate that explanation.
Right. And the goal here is to really encourage the peer tutor to reflect on the problem-solving process and to make sure that the tutee is receiving accurate and helpful feedback.
Makes sense.
And the system also offers on-demand hints specifically for the tutors.
Okay.
Again, integrating CTA's hint functionality
Right.
with prompts that are designed to encourage them to elaborate on their explanations.
So it's like scaffolding for the tutors as well.
Exactly.
Okay, so what did they find? Did this approach lead to better learning outcomes?
Well, similarly to our first example,
Yeah.
the study showed that all students learned,
Yeah.
right? So there were learning gains overall between the initial assessment and the follow-up assessment.
Okay.
But there wasn't a statistically significant difference in learning gains between the students who received this adaptive peer tutoring support and those in a control group who were just doing standard fixed peer tutoring.
Interesting. So once again, the adaptive element didn't automatically translate into superior learning outcomes.
Right, exactly.
But did they find any other interesting patterns in the data?
Yeah, so they did find some important correlations.
Okay.
They found that the learning of the peer tutors was positively correlated with those more reflective aspects of the tutoring role.
Hmm.
So things like, reviewing the tutee's errors, responding to their requests for assistance, giving feedback.
Uh-huh.
So the more the tutors were engaged in those activities, the more they learned themselves.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and conversely, the learning of the tutees was negatively correlated with instances where the tutors made errors in their assessments.
Oh, interesting.
And situations where the tutors didn't effectively communicate the adaptive feedback they were receiving from the system.
I see.
And table 3 in the paper actually gives a really nice example of this, where the tutors seems to understand their own mistake based on the system's input,
Right.
but they don't really convey that understanding to the tutee in a way that promotes their learning.
Mm.
So it's really highlighting, the complexity of peer tutoring, right?
Yeah.
The tutor is not just responsible for their own understanding, they're also responsible for guiding their partner.
And it sounds like the system's feedback to the tutor, while helpful for the tutor, didn't always translate into better support for the tutee.
Exactly. And so it really raises this question of, how do we best support the tutors in their role,
Yeah.
not just in terms of their own problem-solving abilities,
Right.
but also in their capacity to provide effective guidance and explanations to their peers.
That's a great question. So as we kind of synthesize these two examples,
Mm-hmm.
what are some of the main takeaways from these explorations into adaptive collaboration support using intelligent tutoring technology?
Yeah, so I think one of the main takeaways is that leveraging these detailed problem-solving models
Yeah.
that are embedded within intelligent tutoring systems is a really promising avenue for developing and implementing adaptive collaboration support.
Mm-hmm.
And even with the current limitations and the accuracy of automated dialogue analysis,
Right.
we can still provide valuable targeted assistance
Yeah,
based on observing what students are actually doing as they problem solve together.
that's a good point.
Right, and it seems like these initial studies have shown that this approach can actually have an impact on student interaction patterns.
Uh-huh.
Right, so it can encourage more productive collaborative behaviors.
In certain contexts.
Right.
But as we see, the fact that we haven't consistently seen these like huge boosts in learning outcomes
Yeah.
suggests that there's still a lot more work to be done
Right.
in this area.
Exactly, and the researchers themselves have pointed out that combining the insights from problem-solving models with advancements in automated dialogue analysis
Yeah,
could be a really fruitful direction for future work.
that makes sense.
And they've mentioned some ongoing efforts to analyze the quality of tutor help, for example. So I think this is definitely an area where we're going to see a lot more research in the coming years.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, and the commentary by Pallas and Jux,
Yeah.
I think they add a really insightful layer to this discussion.
How so?
Well, they emphasize that the software itself becomes almost like another participant in the collaborative interaction.
Oh, interesting.
Right. It's not just this neutral platform. It's
Yeah.
actually shaping how students interact.
And they raise some really important questions about how learners perceive this technological partner. Do they view it as a helpful resource when they're stuck? Or do they view it as an unquestionable authority?
Right, exactly.
And how does their understanding of how to interact with the tool itself
Right.
influence their natural collaborative tendencies?
Exactly. And so, this kind of leads to their second point, which is the potential for over-scaffolding.
Over scaffolding.
Right. So how do we make sure that the system is providing helpful guidance
Yeah,
without inadvertently undermining students' own initiative
right.
and disrupting the organic flow of their problem solving and interaction?
That's a really important question.
Yeah, and so who ultimately holds responsibility for effective collaboration?
Yeah.
Is it the computer system or is it the learners themselves?
The tricky balance.
Yeah, and they also rightly highlight the significant cognitive load that's placed on someone like a peer tutor
Well,
who has to simultaneously manage their own learning,
right.
support their partner's learning, and also interpret and act upon feedback from the system.
That's a lot to juggle.
Yeah, it is.
So it seems like there's this tension between providing enough support
Uh-huh.
and fostering independence.
Exactly.
And how do we find that sweet spot?
Yeah, and so this kind of leads us to a final thought-provoking question.
Okay.
Um, and this is drawing on some really interesting parallels from research on individual learning.
Okay.
So we know from studies like Mathan and Codinger's work in 2005 and Kapoor's findings in 2008 that immediate feedback can be very effective for correcting errors in the moment
Right.
and keeping students on track.
Hmm.
But delayed feedback can sometimes be more beneficial for fostering those crucial skills like self-monitoring
Yeah.
and the ability to transfer knowledge to new situations.
Hmm.
So if we apply that logic to collaborative learning,
Yeah.
immediate feedback from an adaptive system might improve the specific interaction that's happening right now between the student. But perhaps strategically delaying some feedback
Yeah.
could be more effective in helping them develop stronger, more independent collaborative skills
That makes sense.
that they can apply in future situations.
So it's about thinking about the long-term goals,
Exactly.
not just the immediate outcomes.
Right. And so this really raises the question, you know, what are the optimal timing strategies
Yeah.
for delivering adaptive collaboration support for different learning goals?
Right.
And how can we design these adaptive systems
Yeah.
to intentionally withhold or provide support
Hmm.
at precisely the right moment?
It's a fascinating area for future research.
Yeah, it really is. And it really makes you think about that subtle but crucial balance
Yeah.
between providing enough guidance and nurturing truly independent collaborative learning.
Absolutely.
So I think that's a great place to end our deep dive today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining.
It was a really stimulating conversation.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
All right, till next time.
See ya.
Bye.